Yo, what's going on, fam out there? It's your boy Tahir Johnson, and we are back with another episode of the Cannabis Diversity Report. This week, I have my friends live from Denver, Colorado, Kelly Perez and Courtney Mathis, the co-founders of Cannabis Doing Good and the Cannabis Impact Fund, and a special guest host I see standing behind me. Courtney and Kelly, how y'all doing today?
We are so good. Thanks for asking. You?
Good. I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure, being at home, working from home with the family and getting stuff done.
It's great to be here. It's good to see you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you. It definitely is. That's something that we were, of course, just talking about off camera before we got on. How much of, although it's a challenge, but a blessing to be here doing this. You ladies as entrepreneurs are doing some great things in the industry. Not just for yourselves, but also to help other people. Could you talk a little bit about, Cannabis Doing Good first and what you're doing with the organization?
Yes, thank you. Cannabis Doing Good. I mean, we started a couple of years ago after our consultancy with Kind Colorado. We just realized we couldn't reach as many companies as we wanted to at once. And we also had, found a lot of folks doing good in the space. And we really wanted to bring us all together so that we could, share resources, connect with community, and the areas of racial justice, environmental sustainability, and community just kept popping up again and again and again. And that's what we did with our individual clients. So we realized we kind of needed to build an on-ramp to what we were talking about. What is a purpose-driven, what is purpose-driven in cannabis? So that's what we started. And Courtney, was it 2 years ago? Was it 3? I don't even remember.
3 years.
3 years. We threw some events where we invited community members and cannabis because of the barriers between like the nonprofit and community sector against cannabis, like the folks had thoughts about us, and we really wanted to say, this is us. And our first event, we expected a couple of people. 125 people showed up, the heads of cannabis companies. Really, we had struck something when we said, we care about things and we want to show the community we do. And it saved us from having to develop each individual relationship with community, an organization, and a cannabis company. So we funded a land trust. It was amazing. It was the funnest thing we'd ever done in cannabis. Like, these are the people we want to be around. And I'll stop there. Courtney, what do you want to say?
No, that's good. I think just, as Kelly said, we were really trying to test the market. Is there a need and a want and a desire for a purpose-driven cannabis sector and for a conscious movement? And we threw event after event. As Kelly said, our first one was such a huge surprise, and we were so incredibly lucky and grateful to have so many people show up. And then we started doing events in Missouri and Louisiana and Las Vegas, and developing these really meaningful partnerships. So we thought, all right, I think there's something to this. It turns out people really do want a purpose-driven cannabis movement. So after that, we launched a digital campaign. Following that, we launched our awards program. And then this year, in a matter of a month, we're actually launching our membership program, which is, on its face, sounds a little bit boring. But the truth is, it's really about organizing the cannabis community around purpose. Purpose for us is identified by racial justice, environmental sustainability and environmental justice, and community benefit. And we can organize the industry around these things that we care about, get businesses to show up and say, not only do we care about these things, but we care about doing better in these areas. So the purpose of the membership program is then to give them programs and community and peer-to-peer learning and access to experts and all of these pathways so they can actually learn and do better in those areas. And the other huge benefit is that once they're part of the Cannabis Doing Good movement and community, we then have the tools to tell consumers these are purpose-driven companies so that consumers can use their dollars to support businesses that are in fact championing racial justice and sustainability and community benefit. And then we've created this entire ecosystem of companies and consumers who care about taking care of our planet and taking care of our Black and brown neighbors and taking care of marginalized communities. And we're going to have an economic driver to do that. And that's really powerful. So that's kind of what Cannabis Doing Good has become. And we're just so humbled to be in this place after now 6 years of being like knee deep in mud, which is basically what being in cannabis is. But after 6 years, we're finally at this place where we get to say, we're here, we've arrived, we've heard you, we've done events and we've done awards and we've done campaigns and we've heard you, and we believe that there is in fact an opportunity to build this movement. And so we're doing it.
Right. And I think that's so important, right? And to the point that you all made, that you've been doing this type of work, not just, this isn't brand new, it's something that you've been doing for years, right? I think where over last year in 2020, we saw people finally realize that issues of sustainability and racial justice, social justice were all things that were important. And you saw companies try to start moving towards that, but everybody wasn't able to do it in an authentic way. Why do you think it is? And, why do you think all of a sudden people are realizing that these topics are important? And how do you help people like navigate those issues?
That's such a good question. And you're touching on so many different things. Yes, we are at a cultural inflection point, but like, we're Black. It was not that much of a cultural inflection point for us. It was a realization for other folks, right? And we appreciate that. And racial justice in cannabis was the reason we started. We wanted communities to benefit from the industry that came from us, that we paid for, that systemically we still pay for and don't necessarily benefit from. So that was our initial proposition. And that was frankly hard to sell for business. We really had to figure out, how do we talk about CSR, which we really started in cannabis. I mean, we were the people talking about CSR, and we called it cannabis social responsibility at the time because we see it differently than corporate. It's not, we're so sorry we've polluted your environment. It's more, our story is not a good one. It is not a good one. Our historical context, the racism that has been part of us, how do we turn that into a story we'd be really happy to tell? How do we help companies be assets to community? So really, I mean, when COVID started, we launched right away a fundraising campaign to help our unhoused neighbors, a cannabis inside Friends and Weed, inside cannabis and the restaurant industry effort, and one other beneficiary, Metro Caring, so folks had access to food. And it was a very clunky for folks to donate to us, right? Because nonprofit and cannabis, that's kind of a tricky thing. The folks at Vicente Cedarburg were, ended up watching us for a couple of years and said, we have a nonprofit, would you like it? Because donating to you was a total pain in our butts. We're like, absolutely, we would. And so after our COVID fundraiser, we launched the Cannabis Impact Fund, because just like you're saying, Mr. Floyd's death really did awaken a lot of folks. And we realized that everybody doesn't know what to do. And we pride ourselves in trying to make the right thing the easier thing. Cannabis is our community. And if we can't figure out how to join, the movement for Black lives or be really part of the environmental sustainability effort, how do we expect our people to? I don't know anything about extraction. I don't know anything about so many things, but Courtney and I know about this. We know about community. We know about movements. We're health equity people. Courtney used to be a marine biologist. Like, we are ecological. Like, this is who we are. So we want to invite folks to access the things that we know. Connecting to the movement of for Black lives, like, what a privilege to get to do, and to be really out there saying cannabis cares about things outside of us, and we get why racism in America, systemic racism, is a cannabis issue. So I'll stop talking there. Courtney, do you want to add?
No, I mean, I think that's right. We talk about making the right thing the easy thing, particularly when it comes to racial justice, which for many white folks in the industry feels challenging to step into. I think there's a misconception that in order to do good, that you have to have some amount of abundance or resource, right? And doing the right thing as it pertains to racial justice doesn't take a large budget. It actually takes courage. And what we realize is that if we can create a nonprofit that makes it really easy to support organizations who have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, if we can create a movement and a membership program that give people the tools and the confidence to do the right thing, then hopefully we've given them the courage to step into the space to say racism in America is not okay, and that our industry has been used for racial violence. And it is our role now as entrepreneurs and people in this space to do everything in our power to not only build wealth and opportunity for Black and Brown communities, but to undo harm from years of racial violence. And that racial violence is continuing. And for the cannabis industry to sit back and look as an audience, rather than saying we are actually being leveraged for racial violence and for oppression. And if we don't stop and do something right now, it is going to be too late. I don't want to be part of that legacy. And I know none of you want to be part of that legacy. And especially being a white woman in the industry, I would be ashamed to be a part of building an industry that continue to oppress Black and brown people. So I think that it's really just about having courage, being incredibly humble, knowing that you're not going to get it perfect, knowing that you're going to mess up, and looking at places like Impact Fund and Cannabis Doing Good and Minorities for Medical Marijuana and Hood Incubator and hundreds of others that have really been doing this work for their career, who are well steeped in the issues and saying, I trust you, I'll follow you, give me the tools, and I'm going to take it back to my people. I'm going to take it back to white people. I'm going to take it back to my community, and I'm going to share those tools so that we can continue to undo oppression.
Yeah, and that's so important. And, especially like you said, for you to feel the need, Courtney, to be an ally, even as a white woman, and recognize the need for, this important and building bridges across the industry. As we look back at these types of historical movements, there's always taking collaboration. It can't just be the responsibility of the oppressed to call it out. And I think the way that you guys have moved and even building your organization, right? Like you didn't just say you started a nonprofit and for your benefit, you're supporting organizations that are already doing this work. Could you talk a little bit more about the Cannabis Impact Fund, like the organizations that it supports and, even how you came about to choose the ones that are, that you guys support in there?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So Hood Incubator, duh. How we not, support our homegrown folks? The day they started business, I think we emailed them and said, we're one of you. Like, let's figure out how to work together. And Abele and Lenice have just been very helpful to us over the years. And we realized that for some reason, that is a hard support for some cannabis businesses. Maybe they don't know about them. Maybe they don't understand their connection. Typically, our clients are white cannabis businesses, and we're figuring out what they care about, and we're making a match. For this, we found out the match, and we're inviting cannabis businesses to help us. So Minorities for Medical Marijuana, obviously, Roz is, busting her tail off with her network of folks, really working to support us in the States. And we wanted to, again, create a way for doing the right thing to be the easy thing. Color of Change for us is an absolute no-brainer. I mean, they are really doing amazing, amazing work. Rashad was, a key Black voice that you heard right after the storming of the Capitol, because Color of Change has such credibility. It's a mostly online organizing tool to end racial, to support racial justice. They're amazing. The Bail Project came out of Ferguson after Michael Brown's killing. And once they discovered that, folks were stuck in jail forever because Black and brown folks didn't have small amounts of money to get themselves out of jail. Once you're in jail and you're awaiting your trial, whatever, because you don't have bail, statistically, your chances of being in for a very long time increase, not to mention just the trauma of being in jail for like a parking ticket or a light that's out. So that was a no-brainer to us. And then Black Futures Lab is Alicia Garza, who was one of the Black Lives Matter creators, founders, has her own kind of policy arm that has touched cannabis in a way. And we really wanted to support that. What's the new thinking around taking care of community over public safety? What are the new policies really from the young people that have been just phenomenal. I'm so proud to be like an older person in this movement that I've been in for a really long time. Like, it's just our privilege to support that work. And because we have relationships with nonprofits, because we've been part of Policy Links community, we're policy people. We're health equity and justice people. So we had credibility outside of us. So it was easier for us to make this bridge. And I love that you said, like, making the bridge. We're in the business of making the bridge. We're also in the business of breaking barriers down. So both, right?
Right. And, and that's such a good point, because like, I know that you both come from that policy background, and, in corporate social responsibility, they go hand in hand, right? There's the government that has to implement good policy, and also businesses that have to do the same in order for us to, really reach our goal. Could you talk a little bit about, what are some of the policies that can be put in place that you've seen in cannabis that can help to ensure, racial justice and equity?
Courtney, you want to jump in? You want me to? She doesn't really call herself a policy person.
I don't.
And she doesn't call herself a policy person.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I would love for Kelly to talk about those policies. And then I would, of course, like to follow up with where I think policy will always fall short and why we think activating the business and consumer sector is actually what's going to create social change. But I'll let Kelly go first.
Exactly, because we've seen all the policies not be able to do exactly what they intended to do, because you've got policymakers not terribly informed about us doing things, also at the pressure of consumers. So that's why we have everything in plastic containers, right? Because the fearful consumers wanted to make sure the kids didn't get poisoned by cannabis, right? So that is like a really good example of a policy meaning to do the right thing, but completely failing, and the unintended consequences being tons worse than the thing it meant to solve. So policy is social equity programs, right? The effort to create racial justice in cannabis. Super appreciate that. But the people facilitating, by and large, I mean, I've been with policymakers a very long time, my entire career, are not well steeped in racial justice, health equity, tertiary support, like what happens from the ground up. So they're doing the best that they can. Advocates are helping, but what's the economic driver for this good? It's not really there. So policy is not sufficient, necessary, but not sufficient. We're expecting a free market to just correct for things. Well, civil rights don't work that way. They are policies placed upon businesses to not, remove our human rights. And so think of, Plessy versus Ferguson, any kind of policy in terms of civil rights. Business wasn't doing that. Business was the place we saw it was a problem, the sit-ins, the et cetera, et cetera. Government did that to correct for, but sometimes the people weren't really there. So we need all these things, but we really need a groundswell of consumers to say that times have changed. Our expectations around who we support with our dollar have gotten very sophisticated. The Patagonias, the kind of corporate activism that we expect. And we want to spend our money there. And it's kind of convoluted in cannabis to know who that is, but that's what we're betting on. We educate our people. We help our businesses be those things and know that they need support to be those things. Yes, we keep moving policy forward and keep correcting, but so much of policy, like in Colorado, is a complete retrofit. It was never set. It was set in a system that is created on systemic discrimination. It's not likely to be that revelatory and that repair as much as we want it to be. We've got to move all of us forward with what we think ought to be happening for all of us and for the planet that we live on.
Absolutely. And what were you going to add to that, Courtney, about how businesses can, what part can businesses play in trying to make sure that we have an equitable industry?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, very rarely in history does meaningful social change occur without an economic driver. That is sort of the ugly truth of capitalism. And it sucks, right? And I don't pretend that it's something that we enjoy. But knowing that that's the truth, how do we create an economic driver that is powered by the business and consumer community that is actually going to lead social change? And what I mean by that is that what we know from all other industries is that consumers will choose purpose-driven brands, even if it costs a little bit more, time and time again, when given the choice from a purpose-driven brand for a not purpose-driven brand. So if consumers had the choice, which we believe now more than ever, they really care. They really want to know which companies are upholding racial justice, are upholding and protecting their Black and brown neighbors, are upholding and protecting Indigenous peoples, are upholding and protecting our lands and our oceans and our clean air, upholding and protecting communities that are marginalized, that are hungry, that are sick, that are poor. People care about these things. What they need is to not only be told and demonstrated to that they have the power to influence systems that impact the things they care about, because businesses, by and large, due to our capitalistic system, are the movers and the levers influencing these things. So if you can give a consumer the power and the choice to say, use your dollar to support a company that is doing good, what we believe in is that the companies are then influenced to actually do good and to be transparent and held accountable to their actions, right? But they're not going to do that without that unfortunately, they're just not going to do that without that bottom line driver. We know that their bottom line, we see time and time again, whether you're talking about women in the workforce, Black and brown folks in the workforce, or companies that are cause driven, that when you can incorporate these things into your business practice, you're going to see 10, 15, 20, 30% growth over 5+ years. Policy isn't going to ultimately influence, in my opinion, companies to do these things, because they're always going to find a loophole. They're always going to skirt around, right? But they will certainly be driven by their bottom line. And if we can guarantee growth and prosperity and abundance for these businesses, by then empowering the consumer, I think we've created some meaningful social change, and the accountability and the transparency that we all want. Because as we know, the community has now the power to be organized and mobilized more than ever. So if someone's doing something people don't like, they're going to be called out, right? And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for people to have these built-in accountability mechanisms, to demand transparency, to demand that we do better. And it's not that I think that there are a lot of people working on policy that are making some really incredible movement, and it's not to discredit the work that they're doing. And I think that's a piece of it, but I just don't want to discredit or look away from the actual power that the consumer has to influence a company's decision to do better, especially as it impacts their bottom line.
Well, and I love the race thing. Like, the data say you do so much better when you have a diverse board. The data say when your C-suite is this, you do so much better. And it's specifically race. But that has not been inspiring enough to companies to change it, even though the ROA is very, very clear. I mean, California has a law, half your boards, any publicly traded company, have to be women. Those companies are, by and large, outperforming their peers. But a policy had to create that for businesses to do that. So it can be a symbiotic relationship, right? What I truly and deeply think, though, if we know the ROI leans toward diversity, if we know by 2045 we're a people of color majority country, and you're not figuring out how to be racially just and be anti-racist, who do you think your customers are going to be? Who do you think your employees are going to be? Like, you're really going to be at an operational deficit. So even if you didn't care, even if it wasn't the right thing to do, which clearly it is, it absolutely makes economic sense. So why aren't people doing it? Well, we think because they don't know how. Because we've been in racial justice, for a very long time, and the way that it's being discussed and the way to undo it is really different than it was talked about before. I mean, we were raised like, you don't say black, those are bad words. Like, we don't say race, I don't see color, blah, blah, blah. And we're doing anti-racism trainings in cannabis companies saying, we're not talking about DEI. We think DEI is bull, unless it is really connected to the foundational understanding of how did we get to the systemic racist culture that we have. These were ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and these are the 4 eyes of oppression, are why we're here. So you're not even going to see the people that you're trying to hire. You're not even going to have access, because we were raised in such separate economies, such separate cultures, on purpose to depower Black and brown communities. So the way to fix that is not going to be namby-pamby in your C-suite. You got to get to understand, why are we here? What are the different strategies I'm going to employ to meet my aims, which may in fact be a DEI hiring strategy, once I understand what the heck, right? So it is complicated, but you all, this is our community. We are happy to do this with our community. We are happy to encourage, because racism is a white person's problem. We pay the price with our lives. But if it's going to be undone, they actually have to be fully on board to do it. And we need actively anti-racist people that aren't saying, I'm an ally today. Like, allyship is proven almost every day, right? So it's an action, and we're in it.
And, I think to that point, to hear one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet, which I think Kelly, as getting to, is one of the things that we decided that was really important when we created the Impact Fund, was not just create a pathway for businesses and consumers to pledge 1% or to donate to the Impact Fund to support the movement for Black lives, but also to create an actionable first step towards undoing their ideas around racism and to understanding the 4 eyes of oppression. So we built out a anti-racism training specifically for cannabis that we now conduct with companies across the country. And we're doing it live via Zoom, right, during COVID. And we're actively working on creating that content and producing it so that it can be available on demand and in small chapters. And basically, what are the most accessible pathways to participate in this training as a first step. It's not the only step, right? There's a lot more that has to be done. But we know that offering anti-racism training specifically for the cannabis sector through the Cannabis Impact Fund is absolutely paramount to doing our work. And it's paramount to giving companies an idea of what I was saying earlier, that this industry is being leveraged for oppression on a daily basis. And if you don't understand the role that you're playing, then how in the world do you go about making meaningful change? So we're creating that understanding, right? We hope, I guess, humbly, we hope we're creating that understanding by offering this anti-racism training, and then hopefully coming up with a slew of opportunities with all of the other partners in this space to say, here's what's next. Based on what you've identified or sort of your areas, what are the things that you're doing to uphold oppression? And then here are all the people in this space that exist that can move you along, whether it's around recruiting and hiring, whether it's around culture, whether it's around your vendor supply chain, whether it's around your packaging and your manufacturing, how you grow, where you grow, right? All the things that take place in a cannabis business, there are people out there to move you along. But the first step is understanding, what role do I have to play in this oppressive system? And I'll just say that I think and I hope that our anti-racism training is a really good first step there.
I love it. And that, that's it makes such sense because, again, if we're talking about systemic racism, right, we're talking about something systemic. So it's going to take the establishment of a whole new system to replace that. And everybody has a different role within that to try to, help bring it to life. So it's really important to establish these types of movements, if you will, to make that happen.
Absolutely. And we get culture change. We've been changing culture for a very long time. Ending racism is culture change. It's unveiling the lies and engaging people and saying, like Courtney said, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be courageous. We really do believe in calling in folks. You are our community. We are cannabis. And we cannot look back and think we didn't do everything we could to end racism and understand the ecological connection, that environmental justice, environmental sustainability, they are one benefiting community, that this is all the same conversation about ending oppression, and all oppression is connected. And we have total freedom. People don't think that much of us, right? Maybe hearts and minds are changing, but we're underdogs, many of us, and we have total freedom to just do like it's not ever been done and actually lead other industries, because there's no industry that's nailed racial justice. None. Why not us? We're in the business of changing culture, and we need to help people recognize what are the levers of change in our businesses right now, because we frankly would not be doing this in education. We would not be doing this in real estate or automotive industry, because those industries exist already. They are fully formed. We are still babies. We are still nascent. We are still at the beginning of our understanding of the power that we have. And so our time is really now to just be incredibly bold and take this cultural inflection point that is not separate from the industry that we're in, this moment in time, and say, like, let's really blow this out of the water.
Right. You're so right. And, I think what you talked about is, making sure that these things are so important, right? Racial justice, making sure that there's equity, making sure that women have opportunities. And with us being a new industry, we have the opportunity to not repeat the mistakes that other have, to make sure that we see, again, like you said, the studies are there that show the value of diversity, the return on investment. It makes more successful companies. You could look at Harvard Business Review or anywhere else you would want to go. And to touch on it a little bit, Kelly, I know that you were a part of the white paper that recently came out. As a woman, who also is focused on racial justice, how do you find it important to focus on women's, issues of gender equity and racial issues, and be able to balance and support all of it?
Thank you for asking. I mean, that paper initiated like 2 months before Mr. Floyd was killed. 2 weeks before Mr. Floyd was killed, we had our first Zoom call. And I think I met the prestigious women in the group on Zoom. First time, I didn't know many of them. And I think I was really brought on because I knew one of the key authors. And she was asking me if I could, take a peek at the language, really, to make sure that the language was inclusive. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Then I get on the Zoom and I was really clear about my purpose, right? And I said, hi, I'm Kelly Perez. I'm Black. I'm a woman. Don't ask me to choose between those, because if I have to choose, I'll choose Black every single time. And I truly and deeply believe that when white women are finished with racism, we will be done with racism. And so the person after me was like, mic drop, because there were no other women of color on the call. And I invited a couple of others. And so from the beginning, I was like, all systems of oppression are connected. And so, but it became very difficult when that wasn't a common understanding of everyone in the group, and that they were really fired up around gender inequity, which matters, right? It definitely matters, but my life is more in danger. Our lives are more in danger by being Black than being a woman. And the women's movement and racial justice efforts have a very long 400 years since the Seneca meeting, Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman? Like, we have not merged. The Women's March, suffragists, so many things. And I'm very clear that when white women are fully engaged in ending oppression, like, we will get there, because they have an enormous amount of power. And we frankly don't have the numbers. And we do yeoman's work. Like, we're carrying everything on our backs. And every civil rights gain we've made, white women have benefited, like affirmative action. And so, again, these women, brilliant women, I don't know anything that they know around capital investments and so many things, but what I do know is racial justice. And we weren't well poised to facilitate how do you correct for class difference and power differentials. That's really important things when you're talking about facilitating a group. And it was really, really, really hard. But I like to make lemons from lemonade. And I think we did do, our paper was the C-suite paper with Elise Saraboni and Christine De La Rosa. I think we really focused our paper on the intersectional nature of oppression. That as women, we experience oppression differently. If you're disabled, if you're indigenous, if you're non-gender conforming. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw's work. Like, there's a lot of work out there that really makes it clear that to change, that feminism needs to be intersectional. And that if you want to move us forward, you actually have to deal with the mother of all racism, which is anti-Black racism and anti-indigeneity. And in this group, there wasn't enough time on Zoom to orient to those concepts, as well as do wage inequality and access to capital and equity ownership and brand differentiation and C-suite. So I did my best. I also had to pull out for part of it because Mr. Floyd was killed, because I have responsibilities in my community as a Black woman that do not allow for an ongoing volunteer effort that isn't going to serve my community exactly. So I did my best, and the women were lovely and gracious. And I think we've come out with a pretty good product, given all the limitations of data and such. But we really must disaggregate data. Like, people of color and women's data needs to be separate so that we can have aims and metrics and goals. And I hope I was clear to say to this powerful group of women, I'm asking you, please join me in ending oppression that kills us, right? We will have gender equity when we have racial equity, honestly. And I pushed also to call it parity, because women are 51% of the population. You're simply asking for equal, right? Equity is, there have been systems that have kept us historically and generationally oppressed, and to undo them require equitable solutions, meaning we don't all start from the same point. In order to get to the end, we need different things. So thanks for asking.
No, well, like I said, I definitely want to applaud the work and your contribution to that. It takes, so many different points of views to be able to get to, try to push us towards this greater good. And, I think that's one of the reasons that you and Courtney working together is so powerful, where you guys are on the same page, you're collaborating, it's not just self-serving. You both have interest in towards getting towards this common goal of, and I think that's important to say, not just equity, but parity, because it's, like you said, it's not just asking for something that isn't deserved. It's you deserve what you get is half of the population.
And we fight all the time. Courtney, tell them we fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's we're incredibly lucky that Kelly and I so often challenge each other, but we do it with deep respect and genuine love for one another. And there are perspectives that we hold that are different, and there are perspectives that we hold that are very similar. Kelly and I were very similar in class in the way that we were raised, which allows us to have many points of identification. But certainly her experience as a Black woman is not one that I always understand. And Kelly constantly challenges me to say, you are a white woman in this space. If not you, then who? Right? Go to your people, do your work, share what you've learned. She's, you know, truthfully, the emotional labor for any Black woman to mentor and teach white people or white women what are the tools and the journey to being anti-racist is really intense. I don't say this as sort of a top line, like, oh, I'm blessed. I am so lucky that Kelly has invested in me and in our business and in our relationship so that I feel more empowered than I ever have to go back into white communities and say, I'm going to need to challenge the way we think about that. Or can we challenge the way we use that word? Or maybe your book club's not going to be enough. And here's why, right? It's not, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I have a long way to go. I'm just saying that I completely honor the emotional labor of any Black person or brown person that has to move a white person along in their journey. And the best thing that I can do, right? The best way that I pay it forward, my best form of gratitude to Kelly and to all Black and brown communities is to take what I've learned and move it into white spaces. However, that has not come without a lot of push and pull. And that's just the truth, right? Because there are things that she and I disagree on and that we constantly have to compromise on. But we are a practice in what it looks like to have meaningful conversations around race and class and opportunity and challenge and barriers and oppression. We are a live study of what that looks like. And it's messy and it's sometimes really painful, but it's always been done. Our learning with each other has always been done with the truest intent and of love and respect and open and true openness, and what Kelly often calls shame resilience. Certainly being a white woman in this space, you have to be incredibly shame resilient. I think that I am. And I think that I have to continue to be. And it's not something that's easily learned, but it is something that you can practice daily.
Yeah. I love that you said that. And I want to define it because I never define it and it's important. It's like for white people to be uncomfortable is what needs to happen for us to have our lives valued. And so white folks, especially women, are super uncomfortable thinking that they're going to do it wrong and make a mistake and say the wrong thing. We've been socialized, white women especially, but all of us women, to be kind and keep people together and stop conflict. Well, what we're asking for is conflict. You have to have conflict. We have to undo these systems and break them. That is going to cause conflict. And to be shame resilient, I got to practice it not too long ago. It sucks. It means you step fully into your mistakes. You say something stupid, like, do gay people do that? Or, I made a Black woman feel unprofessional about something that I'd said. Oh my God, I felt like crap about it. And she challenged me in front of an audience. And I had to say, all my defense mechanisms came out. And I was like, thank you for trusting our relationship to tell me that I blew it. I'm going to do better. That was not my intent at all. And I recognize that you were harmed. And so I'm going to sit with that and fix it. And then we moved on and we did our work. And she showed up the next day to do a racial justice training in front of a couple hundred people. She was amazing. And I felt I was better than before. I felt closer to her. And I did have an opportunity to say to her, I was talking about production quality, not about you or your material, but I hear how you thought and I hear how you could have, and I won't say it that way again because my mistake. That's what shame resilience is, that you pick yourself up and you get back in there and you are willing to make mistakes. And I love how Courtney referred to our growing up similar class, like meaning we ate meals, green beans out of a can. We both grew up poor in the South. And I want to say when we started our business, we didn't know each other. Very shortly after we started our business was the South Carolina shootings. And this really tells you about who we are and what our relationship is like. And she came over distraught, which I certainly was really distraught. And at some point she said, what can I do? And I got like a fire in me. And I was like, you don't ask me what to do. Do your work. It's out there. It's available. How dare you ask me to carry the emotional labor of your sorrow when I am on my knees? And she was more upset and she left. And she came back the next day, completely pulled together. And she was like, you're totally right. The work is mine. Please, please forgive me for asking you to carry that on top of your own pain and grief. And I was like, okay, she's my person, right? Such enormous courage. And that's what it takes, right? Actively anti-racist white people who are shame resilient and willing to not be perfect, because not being perfect creates the space for all of us to have our lives. And shame resilience works in anything. It's not just race. It's that feeling you get in your gut when you blew it, how embarrassed you are. You can survive that. You can survive that. We can't survive these negative stereotypes and perceptions that folks aren't willing to challenge that get us killed.
Right. And I got to say, I love everything you just said. I think first, just to even realize that realization that diversity is so broad, right? There were so many ways that you were different, but there were ways that you were alike. Diversity is race, sex, gender, sexual preference, class, age, so many different things. And just finding those ways to, for one, respect your differences, but to find a commonality to work together on it is something that was so dope. I think as we look at the cannabis industry, it is one that's driven by so many important social justice issues and causes. For people that might be on the outside looking in, that want to know how they can use their voice, if they're just a everyday person or they want to support, what do you think are the best ways that people can get involved and be active in the movement?
Courtney Mathis.
I think one of the easiest things to do, and I know this always doesn't always feel the most fulfilling, but, anyone can contribute to the Impact Fund. And we really have done a lot of work to find 5 grantees that we feel like are upholding various parts of the movement for Black lives and doing a really good job there. And even $5 goes a long way to supporting these organizations. And I think that last summer and certainly all the years before that are really good examples of how movements arise, it gets people's attention, elections happen, vaccines happen, and people move on. And I kind of want to say it is not time to move on. The work is not done. We know that people are suffering. We know that people are out of work. We know people are home with their children. We know that people are hungry. We know that if you're Black or brown, you're still afraid to go for a run. There's a lot of heaviness on people's shoulders right now. And if all you can do is share on your social media about Cannabis Impact Fund or donate $5, maybe you have something to say and you want to write a blog post. Maybe you're undoing your own privilege. Maybe you're addressing your own ideas around white supremacy. Maybe you have something to share. We are always looking for content. We are looking for people to share about who we are and what we do. And we're always looking for donations. And so those 3 things are really meaningful and hopefully don't take up too much of people's time, because we know that time is valuable as everyone is working to care for themselves and their families and their communities. So those are some small ways that I would encourage people to continue to act. And I think the message there really is that our work isn't done, and it's not going to be done for a long time. So let's keep it up.
And people hold up systems. So many times folks want to talk about the interpersonal, like if we were nicer to Black people, don't be nice to me. I don't care. Call me the N-word. I don't really care. Stop killing my people with the systems that kill us. That is more important to me. And I only say that remove it from the interpersonal. Your work is personal, and finding resources for anti-racism as white people. You can go to Surge. We have resources for you, because there is work white people need to do with white people. The emotional labor of a person of color to have to work through some, preschool level, I don't mean to be a jerk, but beginning level anti-racism is not a good use of my time or my emotional energy. There's a lot of sources for that information, but to remove it from the interpersonal and really think about it as systems. Because even things like the MORE Act that has a ton of good provisions in it, right? Some of those add-on amendments make it anti-Black. And if you're not looking at systems, well, that doesn't sound bad. That doesn't sound mean to people. Oh yeah, that's an incredibly additional burden on the social equity gains we've made in community, and small businesses that are Black and brown cannot survive those extra taxes and licenses. But you have to be thinking about what's anti-Black here? What are the consequences going to be here? And that takes practice and a way of looking at the interconnectivity of our sector. There's a ton of advocates. There's a ton of people that, not a ton of advocates. It's very hard to stay in the advocacy game and the wanting to do good game without an economic driver. The driver is for companies to function as easy as possible, right? That's what they're pushing for. Sometimes them and policymakers totally work together to make that ease. That doesn't mean it's going to be anti-Black. That doesn't mean it's a revelatory. It doesn't mean it repairs communities. It doesn't mean it's really what we want it to be. So we better use our voices, right? And use your dollar to shop companies that you do know are doing something, because that data really encourages. We're a copycat industry. If you're doing the right thing, other people want that. They want to do that. And we're going to figure out how to make that easy for you. And it's not shoes for dogs. It's not the Humane Society. As much as that you want to do that, and perhaps do that in the internal of your organization for your employees to connect them. But outside, we have some very clear things that we need to do. We are in an existential climate crisis. We have a virus. We have racial inequities that are killing us. Really take your focus broad, because cannabis is connected to every single one of those things. It's us. And the levers of change for us are right here. We are making decisions every day that say we care about these things, or we're fine filling landfills with plastic.
Yep. And I want to add one more thing that I feel like we touched on, but I want to really drive home. I tease people and say, like, for the love of Pete, no more book clubs. And it's not that learning isn't important, but when you, and learning is ongoing, but when you're using learning as a mechanism to achieve perfection, you are absolutely feeding into white patriarchy, which tells us that the only thing that's good enough is perfect. We are not going to be perfect as white folks in this space. We are not going to be perfect at undoing systems of oppression. We are going to mess up. So for 2 hours, for 5 minutes, for 2 weeks, put down your book, move outside of the safety of your book club, and really do what Kelly is challenging you to do, which is to look bigger at broader systems of oppression and figure out the role that you play and make actionable steps to undoing them. And you are going to mess up. Right? It's not that you stop doing your book club. It's just you could read 500 books and still not feel confident enough to hold a conversation, right? And
like your book club is made up of people like you. Like we've watched white folks alone spiral to the least common denominator. It wouldn't be right for a person of color to be there to lift them up, because that emotional labor is too much. But you're not going to fix a problem with the same basic information that you had before you tried. Yeah. You actually have to be out there practicing and challenging the supremacy of the white body, which you don't always get in your book club. Like, what does that really look like? How do I embody this? It's not, don't read, like I'm a bibliophile, freaking read, but don't think that that's enough.
Don't think it's enough. It's just not enough. And don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough, nor let perfection be the enemy of getting started on actionable change.
And one more thing. Intent, intending to have a diverse workforce, but giving up as soon as you don't get a diverse pool of applicants. And then, I tried, I couldn't find them. Doesn't meet your impact, right? Your impact was nothing. So in fact, your intent has to match your impact, or it's BS. So what are the steps that you need to take? And we've also seen white folks want to jump in and do the things really quick and share all the anti-racism information. Well, that's not actually authentic. Like, you kind of got to own it. It's okay to share resources, but what are you doing, as Courtney said, to find out how am I benefiting from white supremacy and how do I undo it? And colorism and racism, like, I'm a light-skinned Black woman that has considerable privilege. Like, I have privilege. I got to do something with it. Courtney has more privilege. She's got to do something with it. If we are, movers and shakers in the space, what are we going to do to make things different? And we think we have this enormous opportunity because consumers actually do care about stuff. They want to move things forward. They have shown us that. So let's figure out how to work with them to be cultural change makers like cannabis has always been. And we don't need to be extractive capitalists. Those are there, but they're not where I'm spending my dollar.
Yep. Your dollar's your vote. Your dollar's your vote. Election doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in small bursts, right? Election happens every day when you use your dollar.
So true. So true. And to make sure people do know, can you tell where they can find out more, where they can look up the Cannabis Impact Fund and Cannabis Doing Good?
Sorry.
CannabisImpactFund.org and CannabisDoingGood.com. If you go to CannabisDoingGood.com, an opportunity to contribute to the Cannabis Impact Fund pops right up. And just to know, like, organizations are looking at what we're doing, you know, and so it is a very big deal for us to say, we care about things outside of cannabis. We recognize we are part of this thing, and we are not only so self-serving that we don't know we should be part of moving things forward. Courtney, any other socials you want to give them? I know you've got a little helper.
Oh, I just quietly shoot her. She's like, I just wanted to say I love you. And I'm like, this is a great time for that. Cannabis Doing Good is at CDG Socials. That's on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, at CDG Socials. We are always updating. We're posting resources. We are pointing folks in all the directions of all the other people in the space doing amazing things. We are about calling in, not calling out. That is our community. We feel like accountability and transparency and progress happen through calling people in. So that is what we're doing on our socials and our platform. That's what we'll be doing with our membership program that launches in a few weeks. So please, please, please follow us. Stay tuned. We have a lot more to come, and we are nowhere close to done yet.
And we are not goody two shoes. I got kicked out of Catholic school and the Girl Scouts. She's a preacher's kid. You don't even want to know the detail there. Just join us in moving us all forward. We don't have to be imperfect together. You're our community, and we take a lot of pride in the potential of who we can be, and we believe in it.
Super dope. And, you know, I'm always glad to support y'all. Everybody out there, if you're listening, please make sure you go support Cannabis Doing Good and the Cannabis Impact Fund. Also want to thank some of our sponsors that have supported my work here at NCIA and allowed me to, do these DEI programs, do this great show for you guys week after week. Big shout out to Copper State Farms, law offices of Omar Figueroa and Tahoe Wellness for supporting us. Oh, by the way, make sure you go download the NCIA app and check us out on all the social platforms too. Kelly and Courtney, going blank at the end. It was so dope rapping with y'all. Looking forward to catching up with you soon. And thanks for joining me.
And we love you, and we so appreciate your work. You are a phenomenal leader in this space. And it, like, something shifted when you came on the stage. And we know it wasn't, we know it was Oaksterdam. And like, you've done all your work and worked so hard, but just know that we really love and respect your work and really deeply appreciate you including us.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tahir.